Hello guys, welcome to the channel. Joffrey Noodle Legs here today with a very difficult video, in a sense that it's been very difficult to make, because today I'm going through my top 10 favourite David Bowie albums. It's such a minefield and a nightmare to go through, just because there's so much to do. There's so many amazing albums that I just couldn't, you can only squeeze 10 in 10, can't you? So it's really difficult. My little doggy's here, wants to say hello. Come on in. Come and say hello. Come on. Here he is. I know you've all come to see Sullivan. There he is. He's a good boy. Hello everybody. So that's Sullivan, everyone. Oh, a good boy. So that's him. And so, I don't know if you can see me spider. He's out and about. He's up here somewhere. Let me have a little look. I don't know if you can see him. There he is, my spider from Mars. So, yeah, difficult top 10, really difficult. So let's get on with it, shall we? And I know a lot of you are going to disagree with my choices, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But before I get through to the top 10, I've got a few honourable mentions I will mention, just because I really loved them but couldn't squeeze them into the top 10. Sullivan, come on down, darling. One of the honourable mentions is Diamond Dogs. This is a great album. I think it's got the hit single Rebel Rebel on it. Really cool cover. One of his sort of post Stardust albums, I believe. Really cool. Great album. Diamond Dogs. Just couldn't fit it in, guys. Another honourable mention is a more sort of a latter career ones, and that is Outside. Another really good album. Absolutely love this album. So tempted to put it in the top 10, but it just missed out in going in there. Another cracking great album from David Bowie, Outside. Another one that just missed out was a live album. There is a couple of live albums in my top 10, but this one, Ziggy Stardust, and the Spiders from Mars, the motion picture soundtrack. Yes, that nearly got in because it's an amazing concert. Really cool. I think it was his farewell concert as Ziggy Stardust. And when he did this, he sort of, like I said, it's the last concert we're ever going to do. I think most people thought it was the last concert David Bowie was going to do. But I think he just meant it's the last concert of Ziggy Stardust. So that's an honourable mention. Another honourable mention, one of his Berlin albums, and that is Low. Another fantastic album. It's sort of 50-50, sort of instrumental and vocal. It's a really cool album. I believe it's stuff that he's done with Brian Eno and sort of Iggy Pop, or around that sort of period in the sort of 70s where he went to Berlin. And from his Berlin period, the album Low, he made 3 albums from Berlin, I believe. So they're my honourable mentions. I believe that's all of them. Let me just double check. Yeah. So here we go. My top 10 favourite David Bowie albums. Now, this is not saying these are the best albums he's ever done. Okay. Please do not comment below saying, oh, how can you say that? How can you not include this? This is my personal favourite top 10 David Bowie albums, okay? There's no malicious there. There's nothing to hurt anyone's feelings. It's just my top 10. Okay, at number 10 is his I believe it's 1980. I'm sure it was. But it's Scary Monsters, Super Creeps. This was a fantastic album. It was I think this was the second to 4 album that I bought of his. The first album I ever bought of David Bowie was Lodger, which was again one of his Berlin albums. Really cool album. Didn't make the top 10. But yeah, I really loved that, and I really loved Scary Movie. The first record I ever bought of David Bowie was Rebel Rebel, a single, which I bought from Boots and it was about 40p it was in the charts and it was 40p, and that was the first record I ever bought of David Bowie. And the first LPs I ever bought was Lodger and Scary Monster. And so then I started to collect all of his albums on vinyl. And then then CDs came out in the 80s. And the very first Bowie CD I ever bought was a compilation, and that was Changes to Bowie. And it cost me a fortune because it was just like new. CDs were new. So it cost me an absolute fortune. Anyway, I'm waffling. That's number 10. Number 9 is one of his more sort of proggy sort of albums from the late 60s, early 70s, and that's The Man Who Sold the World. Really love this album. The Width of the Circle is a great track. It's a very sort of experimental sort of album for him. There's a lot of sort of like elements of sort of rock and sort of jazz, sort of kind of doesn't sound jazzy, but it's got jazz sort of way the songs are formed are quite jazzy, and it's like where it sort of like breaks into different areas of sound. And I love that album, The Man Who Sold to the World, and it took me a while to really get into it, because it's probably one of his least commercial sounding albums, but it's an amazing album, and that's my number 9 favourite David Bowie album, and that's The Man Who Sold the World. Now, the number 8 is an album from 2000. Well, it's not from 2000, but it was recorded in the year 2000, and it's a live album, and it's Glastonbury. I love this album because it's such an important album, I think. It's like one of, I don't know if Bowie appeared at Glastonbury after this, but this was like a real kind of like look back on a career, and it was just a fantastic set. This does include the Blu-ray of the concert as well as the double album and a booklet. This is the box set of it, but there's not that many sort of live sort of recordings that I'm on sort of like DVD or whatever from that sort of period. Yeah, he's done like there's been like that the Storyteller and all this kind of thing, and I know there's been some live material released with 9 Inch Nails. I do have a live album of that, but this was a really cool concert. It's such an enjoyable to listen to, and it's amazing to watch, seeing David in his prime in 2000, you know, and it's just sort of like so cool to sort of like have this. And I'm glad that they released it. It's a really fine box set as well, and that's my number 8 favourite David Bowie album, Glastonbury. And you're thinking, what, of all the classic albums he's done, this is my choice, and this is what I like. This is what I listen to most, and this is what I enjoy, and that's it. That's all there is to it. Number 7, classic 70s glam rock album of David Bowie, and that's Aladdin Sane. A lot of people's favourite album. It's got some amazing songs on there. Aladdin Sane, Pretty Stars, a great album. I really enjoyed the album. That's great artwork, and this was probably one of his most iconic sort of images. I do have a tattoo of that on my arm. That image is up here on my arm. I don't think I could show you, but it's so old and it looks so dated now. I don't know if you can even see it, just there. So old, but yeah. So that's amazing album, and I just love Aladdin Sane. It's one of his real contemporary sort of works, and it is a difficult listen at first because some of his the piano work can sound a bit out of key, out of tune, but it all sort of like adds to the song, especially like in Aladdin Sane, because it's supposed to give you that insane kind of like feeling, and it's amazing. It's such a clever album, Aladdin Sane, and that is my number 7, I believe. Number 6, great album. I absolutely love this album. It's one of the albums I listen to and play through all the way and absolutely love it, and it's Station to Station. It's not a very long album. It's only got 6 tracks on it. but they're quite lengthy tracks, and it contains my favourite David Bowie song of all time, and that is Wild as the Wind, which I absolutely love. It's a great album cover, that's taken from the film The Man Who Fell to Earth. Although this album has nothing to do with that at all. It's just that obviously that's what they decided to use for the cover. But it's a great album. Really, really cool. It's got Carlos on guitar and stuff on there, which is fantastic. I really love it. Yes, it's a short album, but it's a really, really good album, station to station. Golden Years is on it. Don't know the other singles on it. Was it TVC 15? Yeah, and Wild as the Wind. It's epic. Really cool album. Number 6, Station to Station. So we're down to my top 5 favourite David Bowie albums, and they're probably, I don't know if they're going to be, oh yeah, maybe, yeah, I can see the obvious, but I don't know. But number 5 is another one of his Berlin albums, and it's Heroes. Fantastic album, just an iconic sort of album of that time. I loved the song Heroes. I love Beauty and the Beast. There's some amazing songs on this album that I absolutely really, really enjoy. But yeah, great album. I love these. These are all from my box sets. I bought all those sort of Bowie remastered box sets when they came out. So these covers and all that are all from that box set. So most of them are anyway. Absolutely fantastic album. Heroes is my 5th favourite David Bowie album. And I think it's probably about my 3rd or 4th album because I brought. I was young at the time when I really got into David Bowie. It was like the really late sort of 70s, sort of 78, 79, 80. I'm not sure. I know how I got into him, and it's going to sound pathetic, but I bought the single Rebel Rebel because I like the cover. Stupid, isn't it? But then I absolutely, when I bought it, I loved the song, and I just played it all the time, and I just loved David Bowie from then. But I could never really afford any of his sort of records or stuff like that because, I was a young boy when that sort of come out, and it was just like, I had a tiny little Fidelity record player, and so just had a few records now and again, and I used to go to a social club, and the guy who used to run it used to give me some records out of the jukebox. I used to have some Queen records and some Ian Dury and stuff like that in the sort of like late 70s. So it was quite cool, and that Rebel Rebel was something that I bought because I liked the cover. But then I fell in love with David Bowie since then. So there we go. Stupid way, isn't it, really? But then I became total David Bowie fanatic over the years and loved pretty much most of his albums. He's done some albums I'm not particularly fond of, but he's done some amazing albums too. Number 4 is a live album, and it's a live album from his Berlin years, and it's called Stages. I really like this album. It's quite a lo-fi sort of sound to it, which I like, and it's got a very sort of like synthesizer and electronic sound to it, and it's a really cool album. Really enjoyed it. Obviously there is David Live, which is another classic David Bowie live album, but it didn't make my top 10 because it's not one that I listen to a lot. This I do. I love this album. I just like the mixture and the blend and the sound of the songs on this album were a little bit more stripped back and kind of really lo-fi, which I really, really enjoyed. And it was a different sort of sound, and I loved it. So Stages is my 4th favourite David Bowie album. So we're down to the top 3, my top 3 David Bowie albums. Number 3 begins one of his latter albums, and it's Heathen. Really great album. Underrated album, I think, in my eyes, for out of his back catalogue. This is probably one of the most sort of like underrated album of his. But I know it's appreciated by quite a few fans. You can see and hear the progression of his sound and the sort of richness of his sound in this album, and it was brilliant. And his vocals on this album were stunning. I just really loved this album, Heathen. Tuesday Child was such a cool track. It's just a great album. Heathen, it's my third favourite David Bowie album. So my top two are two obvious ones. Number two is his probably one of his landmark albums, and that's Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Great album, fantastic. Got amazing tracks on it like 5 Years, Hang On to Yourself, Rock and Roll Suicide, Starman. It's a great album. It's just full of like Bowie in his sort of his glam years, and it's just really, really cool. Absolutely love it. So that's my second. And my first is one that's sort of semi-rock, semi-acoustic album, and it's one of his really, really early albums, and it's Hunky Dory. I just love this album. It's just got some of my favorite songs on here, like Quicksand and Are You Pretty Things. It's such a cool album. It just came. It must have been, is it 1970, 71 when this came out? And it was like, I don't know. It came out when artists like Bob Dylan and Neil Young and that were coming sort of popular, sort of like in the record sort of sales. Obviously, they come out of that 60s sort of 60s beat, and a more sort of progressive American sound was coming through, especially here in the UK, with things like Bob Dylan and Neil Young. And out of Britain came Hunky Dory, which had a little bit of that sound to it, but it still had that sort of bit of British uniqueness to it, and it was sort of like a little bit of like glam rock, but glam rock hadn't actually really come through yet. And this was like an album that I think progressed that sort of genre on, and it's just a great album. It's just a great listen. You can just put it on any time. Quicksand, Kooks, all these great songs on there. Such a great album. Hunky Dory is my favourite David Bowie album. And that's it, guys. I'm so sorry if you don't agree with me, and I've not gone into depth on the albums, because every time I go into depth on any music stuff and I get a little bit thing wrong, I get bombarded with comments down below. And so I try and keep all my music videos really sort of simplistic, because I do get things wrong. I'm an old man now, I'm in my 50s, and I can't remember a lot of stuff from like 30 years ago, when I was into my music really heavily, so, but all I remember is that I loved it, and I love this music, and I'm very passionate about my music. It's just something very special to me, and I just love it so much. And that David Bowie was one of those artists that hit home with me. And I think I drove my mum, my sister, my dad sick to death with playing David Bowie records all the time. And then obviously I went to my teen years, and he came out with albums like Let's Dance and that, and I went to see him on tour. I went to see him a couple of times on the Serious Moonlight tour, and then I saw him on the Glass Spider tour, and then I saw him again somewhere else, and I can't remember, and I saw him with his Tin Machine at a small venue. It's such a cool time, and I just loved it. And every time every time I've seen him, I keep thinking, I wish I saw him on this tour. I wish I saw him on that tour. I wish I saw him on the Stardust tour, or the Heroes and Low tours. But I was lucky. I was lucky to see him at all, to be honest. And I am very lucky to have seen David Bowie about 4 times. 5 times, sorry, because I saw him with the Tin Machine. So I was very, very lucky to see David Bowie in his life. And since he's left the planet, the world's gone a bit messed up. Have you noticed? I keep saying to my friends, the world's been messed up since Bowie's left us. We've had COVID, we've had all these rises in bills, we've had strikes, everything's gone wrong. We've had the war and in Ukraine. It's all gone wrong, and it's all happened since Bowie's died. So maybe there's something to say, something in that. Who knows? But maybe he's upset the balance of the human race. I don't know. But fantastic artist. He's up there for me, my favourite artist, with David Sylvian, Mark Coleman's, you know, New Model Army. He's up there with my favourite artist, Gary Newman. And I just love the guy. I'd never get tired of listening to his voice. It's so different. Every sort of album sounds so different, yet so same, because of his sort of his 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 way, his presentation is quite similar from his first albums to his later albums, Lazarus and The First Day and all that. The later albums that he did, it's still Bowie, isn't it? And it's still got that Bowie feel about it. And there's not been anyone like it. Not been anyone like it at all. No one's sort of come close to sort of like his kind of genius, if you know what I mean. Um, yeah, I love David Sylvian, but David Sylvian's music sounds like David Sylvian, you know. With David Bowie's, it's sort of like crossed so many sort of genres, and but still stayed loyal to the Bowie sound. It's just brilliant, you know. I can see why people love bands like Queen and stuff like that, because that they are quite similar in a sense, like they've had a various career, but they've always had that sound that sounded like Queen. And I think that's what happens with Bowie. He's always had that sound that sounds like Bowie, and that's amazing. Anyway, guys, I hope you like this. I hope you like my choices of my favourite Bowie albums. Again, I'm sorry if yours isn't in there, but I hope there is one or two in there that you like. I'll see you soon.